Family is meant to be your strongest fortress, a sanctuary where trust flourishes and love reigns supreme. They are the guardians you turn to, the unwavering shield against the cruelties of the world. But what happens when the very essence of blood ties falters, when the ones you should depend on become strangers cloaked in familiar faces? I am Daniel Cruz. Never did I envision a day would come when I would stand on the precipice of destroying my own brother. Yet here I am, heart heavy and resolve sharpened, facing the bitter truth that he has ripped away the one thing I cherished above all else: my land, the cradle of my dreams, my very dignity. In this harrowing moment, I've unearthed a haunting reality. Sometimes the bonds of family can become chains, binding you to predators, hiding behind the mask of kinship. When they shift from nurturers to merciless hunters, the question lingers. If you remain silent, if you allow their treachery to go unchecked, will you be consumed whole by their greed? If you don't summon the courage to rise and fight back, they will devour you alive. The land wasn't just dirt to me. It was a tapestry of memories woven into the very soil. It represented my parents' enduring legacy, a sprawling 22 acres of rich, fertile earth nestled on the outskirts of town, where my father cultivated rows of golden corn beneath the generous sun, and my mother nurtured spirited goats that bleated their way into our hearts. They didn't possess much in the way of wealth, but every drop of sweat and every ounce of love they poured into that land transformed it into a treasure. I was cradled by that land. The backdrop of my childhood adventures, I built rickety tree houses high in the embrace of the acacia trees, felt the thrill of danger as I dodged my father's cantankerous old bull, and lay on the cool, dew-kissed grass with my mother. We would gaze at the endless canopy of stars on clear nights, our laughter intertwining with the vast, whispering night until I drifted off to sleep, dreaming among the constellations. When tragedy struck, first my father, taken suddenly by a heart attack, then my mother a year later, her spirit wilting under the weight of grief, the land became my inheritance, a bittersweet gift bequeathed to me in their will. Not to Mark, my older brother, whose ambitions always loomed larger than life. That single fact should have unveiled the truth about Mark. He had always been the one to shine, the golden child adored by all, blessed with a quick wit and a charm that drew people in. However, beneath that radiant facade lay a darker reality, one only those closest to him could perceive. He was a master manipulator, adept at bending others to his will, and he loathed that I had come into possession of the land that represented our parents' toil and dreams. "You don't even know how to run a farm," he spat venomously during the somber gathering at Mom's funeral reception. "What are you going to do with it, Dan? Watch it gather weeds?" The urge to retort, to tell him to shove it, swirled within me like a storm, but I silenced those feelings, biting my tongue, aware that this was neither the time nor the place for such a confrontation. It all began on a sultry Thursday evening, the air thick with humidity that clung to my skin. The phone rang, cutting through the stillness of my living room. It was Mark. "Dan," he said, his voice smooth like honey, "we need to talk about the land." A weariness settled in my chest as I sighed. I was all too familiar with this tune. "Not this again, Mark," I replied, bracing myself. "Just hear me out, little brother. I've been thinking, I can help you. I've got connections, investors. We could transform it, a resort perhaps, or residential community. You'd still own the land, but it would actually generate income for you." Doubt gnawed at me as I hesitated, feeling the familiar tug of his persuasive charm. He always had a knack for weaving grand possibilities from flimsy threads of bad ideas. "Come by my office tomorrow," he insisted, his tone almost conspiratorial. "We'll go over some paperwork. No pressure." No pressure. Right, The next day, I stepped into his office, a space as sleek and polished as a designer magazine spread, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that framed a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the faint scent of leather and success. He greeted me with that blinding, artificial grin that always made me uneasy, but I tried to play along. "Little brother, you made it!" he exclaimed, as he handed me a cup of coffee that was as extravagant as the espresso machine behind him. He settled into the plush leather chair across the glass table, leaning forward with an intensity that filled the room. Then he unfurled his grand vision, a development plan sprawling with potential, investors lined up like eager students. "You don't have to lift a finger," he promised, his voice silky and persuasive. "Just sign these papers giving me management rights to act on your behalf." Management rights. The term felt deceptively benign, but a knot tightened in my stomach. I glanced at the papers, anxiety creeping in. "I'll still own the land, right?" I probed, my voice laced with uncertainty. "Of course, Dan." He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm yet strangely reassuring. "This is just to streamline everything. You wouldn't want to drown in bureaucratic red tape, would you?" Something didn't sit right in the pit of my stomach, a sense of foreboding hovering just at the edges of my thoughts. Yet he was my brother, and family is supposed to trust each other, right? So, against my better judgment, I took a deep breath and signed. "God help me," I signed. It took less than a week for the truth to crash over me like a wave. I wandered into the municipal office, intending to submit some routine paperwork, when the clerk glanced up from her computer screen and said with an unassuming tone, "Oh, you're not the owner anymore. It's been transferred to Mark Cruz." I froze, convinced I had misheard her. "What?" I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest as a cold sweat prickled my brow. She clicked away at the keyboard, pulling up the records, and as the screen refreshed, reality smashed into me with the force of a sledgehammer. My name had vanished completely. In its place, bold and unyielding, was Mark's, transferred, in its entirety. The management rights papers I'd naively signed were nothing more than an elaborate ruse, a full transfer of ownership. He owned the land now. I stood there rooted to the spot in that sterile government office, a hollow sensation enveloping me, as if I had been punched in the gut. The air thickened around me, and the sounds of the bustling office faded into a dull roar, leaving me grappling with the shocking weight of betrayal and loss. I slammed the door to Mark's office, the echo reverberating off the sterile walls. He was locked in a conversation, anxiety etched on his face, but when I burst in, he wore a smirk that made him look like a cat who had just feasted on the canary. "Danny, what's wrong?" he asked, his feigned surprise barely masking the amusement in his eyes. My voice erupted with fury. "What the hell did you make me sign?" He reclined in his leather chair, exuding a calmness that only fueled my anger. "Whoa, whoa, relax, it's just paperwork," he replied almost dismissively. "You stole my land." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and palpable. "Don't be so dramatic," he chuckled, his laughter ringing out like a bell. "It's better this way. I can handle it. You'll thank me later." That laugh, that infuriatingly carefree sound, was a dagger to my chest. It was clear. He relished the chaos he had created, fully aware of his betrayal and completely indifferent to the turmoil he had unleashed. I could have gone to the police, a safe haven for the truth, or rushed to sue him right on the spot. But deep down, I knew Mark was slippery as an eel. He had a knack for twisting narratives, a master at deflecting blame. So I chose silence. I donned a mask of acceptance, acting as if everything was fine. For weeks, I played the part of the unsuspecting fool. I answered his incessant calls, feigning interest in his vapid jokes, smiling through gritted teeth. But behind that fabricated facade, I was a storm brewing in the shadows. I hired a lawyer, a damn good one, sharp as a tack and relentless in pursuit of the truth. Together, we sifted through every single document Mark had filed, peeling away layers of deception. It was during those late nights poring over the painstaking details that we stumbled upon the undeniable evidence. Mark had mortgaged the land, my land, using signatures that were as fraudulent as his character. That revelation hit like a thunderclap. It was fraud, multiple counts, a monumental breach of trust. And in that moment, the tide turned. I had him exactly where I wanted him, but I stayed my hand, savoring the moment. Mark, basking in the glow of his supposed triumph, believed he had emerged victorious. With every click of his camera, he showcased photos of his sprawling land on social media, chronicling his new ventures with an air of arrogance. He spoke of his empire as if it were something to be revered, his words dripping with self-satisfaction. Good. Let him indulge in that false sense of security. I wanted him to sink into complacency, to feel the weight of his victory pressing down on him like a warm blanket. I wanted him to truly believe that I had been defeated, because when I finally made my move, I wanted it to be a strike that pierced through his arrogance, leaving him reeling from the impact. A month later, I invited him to lunch. "Let's bury the hatchet," I said over the phone. He agreed instantly. We met at a nice restaurant. He was grinning, wearing an expensive suit, already on his second whiskey by the time I got there. "Good to see you, little brother," he said. "Ready to let the past go?" "Absolutely," I said, smiling back. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside, every forged document, every mortgage he'd signed illegally, every piece of evidence we'd collected. His face went pale. "Well, what is this?" he stammered. "This," I said, leaning in, "is proof that you're not just a thief, you're a criminal." "You wouldn't?" "Oh, I would," I said coldly. "You have two options: sign the land back to me and pay damages, or I hand this to the police, and they'll eat you alive." 2 weeks later, we found ourselves seated in the stark, intimidating courtroom, the air thick with tension. My lawyer, armed with an arsenal of evidence, dismantled Mark's defenses piece by piece with surgical precision, his words slicing through the silence like a hot knife through butter. He laid bare the forged signatures, clumsy forgeries that revealed Mark's deceit, the fraudulent mortgages, meticulously crafted lies that scammed their way into the system, were exposed under the relentless glare of scrutiny. And then the stolen property, once mine, paraded in a litany of betrayal that seemed to echo through the room. Mark's lawyer, desperate and sweating, floundered on the stand, attempting to spin a tale of miscommunication. But the judge, stern and unyielding, regarded him with an imperceptible shake of her head, her expression a clear signal that the ruse fell flat. When her gavel struck, it reverberated like a thunderclap, a decisive ruling in my favor that felt like a triumphant symphony. Not only was my land returned to me, but Mark was also ordered to compensate for the damages he had inflicted. As the judge's words sank in, Mark's world came crumbling down around him. His accounts were frozen, a chilling metaphor for his sudden fall from grace. The business reputation he had so carefully cultivated, reduced to ashes, charred by his own greed. It was a spectacle of justice, watching him lose everything he had worked for. The weight of his actions now a heavy burden he could no longer carry. People often inquire if I experience any remorse. Number Mark was more than just my brother. He was the architect of my betrayal, the one who carved a deep wound in my heart. When someone shatters your trust in such a profound way, forgiveness becomes an alien concept. Forgetting is simply out of the question. Instead, you become a force of reckoning. You seek to dismantle everything they hold dear, to ensure they understand the weight of their treachery. At times, revenge is not merely an expression of rage. It embodies a quest for equilibrium. Mark stripped me of everything I held dear, leaving a void that echoed with his betrayal. In return, I ensured he felt the sting of loss, a bitter taste of his own making. Now, as I stand on my cherished land, the earth beneath me rich with the legacy my parents fought to preserve, a wave of resolve washes over me. I inhale the scent of the soil, grounding me in our family's history and the sacrifices made for it. In this moment, one thing rings true. I am not to be trifled with, not when it comes to my family, not when it comes to anyone. Subscribe if you enjoyed the story, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.